the far-reaching consequences of what we're doing to try to stop the spread of this virus. Maybe they're necessary, maybe they're not, but we are talking about massive, massive economic losses coming, and that's just the truth. These things we're doing, man, they are drastic measures. I hope they work because we are going to be feeling this for not just, the coming months, for years. No, we're not going to be in lockdown for years, but the economic impact of this is going to be, it's going to be something. Who is that handsome young man from 3 years ago? That was me. I had more hair. Joining me now, William Ruger. He is the president of the American Institute for Economic Research. Okay, William, a few years later, how's the economy doing? How did all those COVID lockdowns work out for the economy?
Yeah, it didn't look like those unintended consequences that many of us understood were likely to happen were actually kind of figured into this, were they, right? People, I think, were looking only in the immediate term and not thinking about the long-term ramifications. And we're seeing some of those now. And unfortunately, at the national level, there were all kinds of challenges, but at the state level, they varied in terms of how they approached it, with some locking down more than others. And, states like Florida seem to have done better without those things.
How did such an insane concept like stopping an economy for a virus, how did something like that ever catch on? It was a worldwide thing. It just blows me away.
Yeah, I think you can understand why in the immediate term, right, when we didn't really know that much, why there was some hesitation. And I think a lot of people would have done this voluntarily, but you could kind of understand it in the short run. The problem is when it became a long-term thing, far after we knew some of the kind of impacts, some of the spread and transmission data about some of the most effective and less effective ways to deal with it. And again, that's where it becomes a lot less forgivable, particularly when there were like these large one-size-fits-all approaches.
Joe Biden is doing a bit of finger pointing because his administration is not exactly, their numbers are not great on the economy. Here's what he had to say yesterday.
Let me be clear. To any corporation that's not brought their prices back down, even as inflation has come down, even as supply chains have been rebuilt, it's time to stop the price gouging and give the American consumer a break.
Is there price gouging out there right now? Is that why prices are so high?
That is not the reason why prices are high. This would suggest, of course, that when prices go down, that somehow people and businesses got more altruistic, right? No, the problem is actually that prices have gone up. That's a sign that we've actually got Federal Reserve policy wrong, right? Our monetary policy has been wrong. Our fiscal policy has been wrong. That's the real challenge here, not, gouging or greedy corporations. Because again, when prices go down, they don't praise businesses for being altruistic.
What is our fiscal policy? If you had to describe it, besides just one word, bad, what is the fiscal policy in this country?
I would say spending, if you're looking for one word. If I could give you two, it would be crony capitalism, right? It's way too many special interests are at the trough, feeding from the kind of the taxpayer's wallet. And, unfortunately, that's a huge issue, right? And again, you could say hey, I'm not one of those special interests, but think of all the millions of Americans who are dependent on government, either subsidies or entitlements, or things that they believe they paid into, like Social Security, which in fact is a welfare program because it's pay as you go.
What's next for the Fed? Are they going to keep raising rates? Do they have to keep raising rates? People just, we just went through Thanksgiving. People are well aware of the costs out there, and they want to know, when's it going to stop? What's next?
Well, you have seen a decline in the rate of inflation. And sometimes people say, oh, inflation is down. Actually, no, it's the decline in the rate of inflation, which means that inflation is still going up. And that's a real problem, right? Because that means that the grocery store shoppers are seeing higher prices. It means that the cost of living for everyday Americans is up. And I think that will have a political effect. I've talked a lot about grocery store voters. I think that could apply to Christmas shopping voters. We see higher prices. We see that sticker shock. And I think it scares people about their economic future and their ability to make ends meet. particularly because it's not the case that people's wages are necessarily in sync with that. I mean, certainly people that are working for the government and get COLAs, those people are okay. But what about the people who aren't?
Okay, so the debt situation in this country, it's obviously bad. It's going to keep getting worse because neither party wants to cut a penny. But what are the implications for the normal American, for me, for you, of a nation like ours running up the debt to where it's going?
Yeah, I mean, look, debt is a tax on the future. At some point, this is going to have to be paid off. One way or another, right? There's no free lunch. Even if there's a default, there's going to be a cost. And who could imagine what would happen if there was a default of the world's largest economy and the most important monetary instrument in the world, which is the dollar. So, this is going to be a real problem ahead. For one thing, it's going to increase the cost of borrowing, and then the percentage of national income that goes to just servicing the debt goes up. And so you could see all the ramifications for that. I mean, we are addicted to government spending. We need to stop and repair our kind of fiscal future. And it's very easy to say, hey, look, we're just going to kind of keep spending and, free money will continue forever. That's not how the world works. It's not how economics work. Eventually, there will be a tight constraint on people. And that's going to mean austerity in one way or another. And and hopefully it's not going to be greater taxes, because that's my fear, is that we'll just tax people. We'll have a wealth tax. And that's not fair to people who are savers. It's not fair to people who have been, responsible with their spending when the government isn't responsible with theirs. So, Congress needs to do its job. Don't spend beyond its means. And if they can't do it, then something like a balanced budget amendment is something that the people I need to bring to the fore, right? We need that maybe bottom-up approach.
Do the people actually want it, though? Isn't that what we always run into, William? The people, they claim to care about spending, but they can't name one government program usually they want to cut.
Well, again, that's the problem. But it's a problem of kind of like, I think, fiscal immaturity, right? The idea that we could continue don't suffer costs is our failure to kind of see beyond the kind of end of our nose, if you will. And so I think that we need people to understand what the real ramifications are for this. And if they don't, then they're going to face it, gradually, and then suddenly, as the old saying goes. And that's not going to be pretty. So one way or another, we're going to have to pay. Do we deal with it now? Or are we going to face something much more dramatic and much more, something that resembles more of a crisis than a responsible approach? And my fear is it's going to be a crisis scenario. And then you're going to have all kinds of, I think, ramifications from that politically, including, I think, further and further, kind of public anger at the establishment that will then lead to, I think, the potential for folks even more irresponsible. Like you could imagine leftist governments coming to power and proposing socialist solutions to problems that are actually government problems, not problems with capitalism, and not problems with markets.
Speaking of irresponsible, as we wrap this up here, the credit card debt, the personal credit card debt in this country, every time I see a new article about it, it's just staggering. It looks like, if you're just looking at the data, it looks like Americans are ringing up the credit cards to try to keep up with their standard of living, and that doesn't end well at all.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing, at least you could say about credit card debt, is that for the most part, there's a much tighter connection between spending and your financial future as an individual. And even with bankruptcy, there are costs imposed from that. The biggest danger, I think, to our country's future is actually government spending, because, again, there's less of a connection between the people spending and the people who will suffer the costs. And I don't want to be living in a late empire situation, so to speak, where we have bread and circuses, but the country decays and declines because of irresponsibility and an unwillingness to deal with that. And maybe it all goes back to the fact that our education system is so broken that we don't actually have people who can kind of be literate economically or understand, kind of the very simple math of you can't spend money you don't have forever.
Yeah, how about that? William, thank you, my brother. I appreciate it.